Don Whitaker did everything the responsible way. For 40 years, he saved. He never splurged, never wasted, never chased a single foolish thing. He was the disciplined one, the sensible one, the one who always said the same word whenever his wife wanted to travel or slow down or finally do the things they'd dreamed about since they were young. Someday, when I retire, when there's time. Don retired at 65 with more money than he'd ever had in his life. And it's one of the saddest stories I know, because Don spent 40 years saving up for a someday that, when it finally arrived, was already empty. He'd been so busy preparing to live that he never quite got around to living, until the day he looked up and realized the life he'd been saving for was already behind him. And the mistake Don made isn't the reckless one everyone warns you about. It's the responsible one that nobody does. It's the one that hides inside good advice, wearing the face of discipline, which is exactly why it's so easy to make and call it being smart. So let me take you back to a young couple, a cheap apartment, and a dream they were absolutely certain they'd get to later, and show you the exact moment later quietly became never, without anyone noticing it happen. It's 1980. Don is 25, newly married to Carol, and they're broke in the way young couples are broke, happy and certain it's temporary. They live in a small apartment in Indiana, and at night they make plans. The big one, the one they come back to again and again, is the coast. Someday they're going to drive the whole Pacific coast together, top down, no schedule, just the two of them and the ocean on their right the whole way up. And Don, being a good and responsible man, has a plan for how they'll get there. Work hard now, save now, be disciplined now. And then, later, once they're secure, once the kids are grown, once he retires, then they'll live. Then they'll take the trip. Then they'll do all of it. So when the first chance came, a friend invited them on a road trip that very first summer, Don did the math and said gently, "Next year, we should save." And it was the right call. It was responsible. It was smart. It was also the very first brick in a wall he'd spend the next 40 years building, one sensible, not yet, at a time. And the thing about later is that it is always, always available. There is never a year where later runs out. The kids came, and the trip moved to when they're older. The kids grew, and it moved to when they're out of the house. Don got promoted, and it moved to when things slow down at work. But a career like Don's never slows down, it only asks for more. Every year, the coast drifted one more year into the future, and every year, Don's reasoning was airtight, responsible, wise. And the account grew, and grew, and grew. But something else was happening quietly that Don never noticed. He was losing the ability to do anything else. For 40 years, the answer to every impulse to rest, to celebrate, to spend a little, to simply enjoy something was not yet. And a man who says not yet to his own life for 4 decades doesn't arrive at retirement full of readiness to finally live. He arrives having forgotten how. The part of Don that knew how to be spontaneous, how to spend without guilt, how to simply be happy in a moment instead of saving it for a better one, that part had gone quiet from 40 years of never being used. Carol noticed. She stopped asking about the coast somewhere in her 50s. She never said why. Here's the thing Don never understood, the thing that would have changed everything. Someday is not a day. It never appears on any calendar. It is not a place you eventually arrive. It is a place you put things to avoid doing them, dressed up as a plan. And Don had made a quiet, catastrophic trade without ever realizing he was making it. He had spent his whole life protecting and growing the one resource you can always get more of, money, by spending, freely and without limit, the one resource you can never get back, time. And not just any time, the good years, the healthy years, the years when he and Carol were young enough and strong enough and together to actually drive that coast the way they dreamed it. Those years are not renewable. There is no overtime shift you can work to earn back your 40s. No savings account that pays them out with interest. Don had a fortune in the one currency that regenerates, and he'd gone bankrupt in the one that doesn't. And he'd done it on purpose, a little more every year, certain the whole time that he was being wise. He guarded his dollars like they were irreplaceable and spent his irreplaceable years like they were free. Don retired on a Friday in his 65th year with a comfortable account and a folder he'd quietly kept for years. Brochures for the coast, the route mapped, the trip he and Carol were finally going to take. Carol had passed the winter before, quietly after a short illness, the way it sometimes happens right at the edge of the finish line a person spent their whole life running toward. And so Don's someday arrived exactly on schedule. The money was there just like he'd planned, every dollar accounted for, and the person he'd saved it all for, the person the entire 40 years had been about, was gone, and the years they could have driven that coast together were gone with her, spent long ago on not yet. Don did eventually make the drive, alone in his 60s, the ocean on his right the whole way, and he said later that the hardest part wasn't the grief exactly, it was the math. That every single overtime shift, every trip they'd skipped to be responsible, every someday, had been him choosing, without knowing it, to trade the actual life they could have shared for a number in an account that Carol would never get to see, and that he now didn't know what to do with.